Try to get everything you can on the west end first, then go inside and help with the partitions, okay?
Okay.
You know, I've been around long enough. I remember when it was kind of unusual to have a small skid steer loader like that on a demolition site. That was until we started getting a little creative with them and seeing what they could really do. Now, it seems like everyone's got at least one skid steer. We run several of them. Plan a lot of our projects around the kind of productivity they can deliver. But that productivity comes from highly skilled operators. People who can run this equipment and run it safely under conditions you just don't see in normal construction. I'm not putting conventional construction down. I'm just saying that demolition is really different. Just because someone's operated a skid steer doesn't mean they've seen all the situations we run into, are familiar with the techniques and attachments we use. And what really separates my operators from the pack is they can do it all safely. We think things through so that at the end of the day, everyone goes home in one piece.
You drop something on the floor and
So you don't just jump on a machine around here. Everyone goes through training, and we're constantly trying to upgrade our skills and safety procedures. First thing we teach our operators is you can't be safe if your machine isn't safe. You've got to figure that if you're responsible for operating the equipment, you're responsible for knowing its operating condition. I don't think anything's as hard on this equipment as demolition, so you've really got to stay on top of it. Every operator has to inspect the machine before every shift. No exceptions. Bottom line, if you don't know, the machine don't go. There's the manufacturer's daily inspection list, and sometimes we add our own items to that. That means tires, structural components, hydraulics, fuel, engine oil and coolant, lights, safety equipment like seat belts and safety bars, the whole 9 yards. And don't forget your own personal protective equipment. At a minimum, you always need a hard hat, safety glasses, and gloves. But try to plan ahead a little too. If you're going to be in a situation where you'll need a respirator for dust or a face shield for sparks or flying debris, take them along so you'll have it when you need it. Just look around you. This building is coming down, and skid steers are going to do a lot of the work. What makes this a successful business and not a disaster in progress is that we know how to do it safely. That means we have safe work practices for every bit of it. If you're running a skid steer, your work affects other people on the job, and you accept responsibility for keeping yourself and the people working around you safe. That starts with being aware of where you're at all the time. That can be a challenge if you get so focused on the work you forget to look where you're going, or you have a blind spot, like to the rear, and can't see where your wheels are. This gets critical if you're working near floor openings or a leading edge. We put up barricades and warnings where there's traffic, and we put down wheel stops where they're required. But people are constantly making new openings, so you really have to stay alert. Usually, you're operating around workers, trucks, and other equipment, and everybody needs to use the same traffic lane, so you have to keep track of what's going on and where everybody's at. On the other hand, for anyone who's working in the same area with a skid steer, look, the operator is using both hands, both feet, and has to have one eye on the road and one eye on the load. That doesn't leave a lot left over to be taking care of you. So stay clear and let them know where you're at. Give these guys some room. Don't put yourself in a situation where you can get injured, like standing next to the machine. These things can turn on a dime. You think you're clear, 2 seconds later you're not. And if you're thinking about hitching a ride or trying to use the bucket for a temporary man lift, those are just bad ideas. Don't risk your neck or the operator's job to try to save a couple of minutes. We're all in this together, and everybody's got to be responsible for safety. When we talk about safe work practices, you got to know that just driving can be a real problem under some of these job conditions. That short wheelbase makes it easy to turn, but it also makes it easy to tip. Slow down over rough terrain or uneven surfaces. Don't drive over obstacles and debris. Clear it out of the way. After all, we're using these to clear out debris, so it just makes sense to keep your own path clear. If you're out of level, that's a bad time to raise the bucket or any attachments. Keep your center of gravity low. If you have to go over a curb or an incline, don't take it at an angle. You risk tipping sideways. These machines can rock forward or backward, and you can still recover, but if it starts going sideways, you can lose it pretty fast. Take a bump or an incline straight on. For a steep incline, the rule is heavy and uphill. These machines are weighted toward the back, so if you're empty, that's your heavy end, and you back up and come down forward. If you're carrying a heavy load or attachment, the weight shifts to the front, so you drive up forward and back down. If you're somewhere in between, it's safest to keep the rear of the machine uphill. That way the bucket will help catch you if you do start to tip. Okay, those are the basics for getting around, but when we use these machines on the interior of a structure, it takes safe operating to a whole other level. For starters, it can be dark, and with low light levels, you've really got to watch where you're going. You add more workers, more machines, and you can see why demolition takes a different level of awareness than conventional construction. My guys make it look easy, but that's because they're good. But still, it's a lot of work. Everyone's had a lot of safety training, and we're checking signals constantly so that everyone knows where everyone else is and what's going on. If you're going to use a skid steer for interior demolition, the first thing you've got to ask yourself is it safe to drive in here? If it's not a slab-on grade, is the floor structurally sound? Will it support the machine and the debris load? You can't tell that by looking at the tile. Someone with the necessary training and experience has to make that determination. If the structure's sound, do you have enough ventilation to prevent exhaust fumes from accumulating? This can be large openings in the structure that promote free airflow, or fans that can exhaust to the exterior. Then you've got your surface hazards, like leading edges or openings in the floor, or is there any live electrical? If so, it needs to be de-energized or plainly marked so you can avoid it. And look around for overhead hazards. This could be anything from stuff hanging from the ceiling that could get in your way to light fixtures, process piping, sprinklers, ductwork, you name it. When you're looking around, don't forget to look up. And before you start taking out any interior walls or partitions, someone with the necessary experience has to determine whether or not they're structural. There's no guessing on this stuff. These things come down fast, and guessing wrong can be deadly. These machines were originally designed for loading. Skid steer loaders, right? But demolition puts a whole new twist on that. A pile of rubble and debris is a long way from a nice clean pile of sand. Odd shapes, weights, sizes, you've really got to know what you're doing. Long stuff tied together, you pull here, it starts pushing something way over there. You have to know what's affected when you take a bite out of a pile. This is where grapple buckets can really help get a hold of stuff. But anytime you grab more, you have to be more careful to not overload the machine. Nothing is uniform, and this stuff doesn't come with the weight stamped on it. You have to test the load every time for weight and balance, and it takes some experience to figure out what you can handle. This isn't a contest. Too much is too much.
Getting overloaded is dangerous for you and hard on the equipment. If it's too heavy, take a smaller bite, bust it up, or use a bigger machine. These things come in sizes.
When you have a good load, lift it carefully. Even if you can handle the weight, a sudden jerk can tip the machine or shake some debris loose. Anytime the bucket is raised, you have to make sure that none of it falls on top of you. Always lower the bucket before you travel. Here's where going over bumps or up and down grades can really affect your balance. Carry it low and make sure you can see where you're going. I know I've said this before, but watch for edges and openings. So you get the load where you want it. You're not done until you dump it safely. Same rules. Don't raise it on the run. Slow down, raise the bucket only as far as you need to, and keep control of the load until you dump it.
Here's a situation that really gets me going. You take a machine that's too small and try to load into a box that's too high. I mean, check this out. You got the arms fully extended. The load's practically straight overhead. If something falls, you better hope that guard over the cab keeps it out. You got the front wheels as far forward as you can go. So you're out of maneuvering room and you don't have enough slack left to tilt the bucket properly, if at all. Even if it's possible to dump the load, there's nothing good about this situation. Everything's maxed and the operator's out of options. Something starts going wrong, it's just going to keep going wrong. Hey Frank, thanks for showing us that. Our guys don't load into conditions like this, and you shouldn't either.
With a little planning, you figure on a bigger machine, a lower truck, or loading out into the proper size dumpster. The work goes faster, it's more efficient, and a heck of a lot safer.
Skid steers are already pretty versatile, but some of the attachments can turn them into a whole other machine. We're really the innovators here. Attachments like grapples and hammers came out of how we use the equipment for demolition.
And we're not done yet. We run into so many different situations that we're always experimenting a little, but that doesn't mean anything goes. It's always safety first, and we only use attachments or techniques that the company has had a chance to examine and approve.
Swapping attachments out is pretty easy. Each manufacturer specifies a sequence for getting these things on and off. I just make sure that none of my operators try any shortcuts.
The way the manufacturer has set this up, you can't miss. You only power up the machine when you're strapped in out of harm's way. And you only work with the connections when the machine is off and the front end is lowered. None of it's very complicated, but it's all critical. Hydraulic systems need to be de-energized before changing connections, and the lockdowns need to be in place before you attempt to move it. We take it by the book. It's a 100% system, and anyone trying to shave a couple minutes off of it is risking an injury and their job.
Of course, you put on a different attachment, now you got a different machine with its own operating characteristics and precautions. I don't fault our guys for getting a little creative, but you gotta know what the limitations of the equipment are.
Like grapples. They give you a lot bigger bite, but just because you can get the grapples around something doesn't mean you can lift it. Same goes for forks. If you're picking up odd items, you better test the load first. And no matter what they look like, they don't make good pry bars. These shears won't handle the big stuff, but the small stuff can still give you plenty of problems. Before you try to cut something free, you have to know if it's going to fall and where and how it's going to fall. Cutting into conduit, process piping, or sprinkler lines can be risky if they haven't been de-energized or drained and flushed. If you don't know for sure that they're safe, you don't want to use the shears to find out. A skid steer makes a great jackhammer, but you've got to resist using it as a pry bar too. It just wasn't made to hold up under that kind of strain. And this is one of those situations where you'll need a face shield to protect yourself from flying debris.
It sounds like something out of a cartoon, but I've seen guys get carried away and start to beat the floor out from under the machine. Like I said, this is a job, not a contest. These machines are so versatile that it's really tempting to push them, and we do. But believe me, there's a difference between being a little creative and trying to do something that's risky and barely possible. That's no way to do your job and no way to run a job.
Skid steers are more productive when you plan the job so that they can do what they do best. Turn hard work into something that's easier, efficient, and safe. A good operator with the proper training makes all the difference. No injuries, no expensive damage, and a lot of valuable work. We try to hire the best and give them the training and equipment they need to do the job safely.
If you've got the talent to run a skid steer and you're willing to get the experience and training necessary for demolition, you can be a real value to this industry.